What's up, guys? Yahooz here. I'm actually re-recording the second part of the World Championship analysis because my first recording kind of dropped a lot of frames later on in the video. So I'm gonna do a re-record and hopefully it turns out better. And yeah, so that's why you'll see me in a new shirt or tank top, whatever you want to call it, and such. But anyway, enough about me. Let's move on to this race. So we have skiffs here, and the thing I want to first and foremost point out is that there is significantly less negative current on the right side of the course, and that's going to be a predominant theme throughout the entire race here. You're going to see how it plays into my strategy as well as a few others throughout the race. And the reason why it's important, just worth knowing in general, is because current is the one thing on SailX that stays constant. Wind can change, wind direction can change, but current on SailX at least is the one thing that sort of just stays the same and no matter what happens in the race. So you can kind of expect to follow where the current is going to help you the most, and it should benefit you in the long run since it's the one constant on SailX. So here in particular, I figure there's going to be a lot of boats starting out right because a lot of these boats know that there's going to be lots of negative current out left. So they're going to start out right at the boat. So for me, I want to start a little bit more mid, has to stay out of the way, sort of avoid the poop chute, and get a good start here. So right now I'm just sort of kind of setting up, waiting for a lane, and yeah, you can see although the shift is pretty left bias right now, I'm still trying to set up right, and so are a lot of other guys. You can see pretty early on that they're sort of meandering over at the boat because they recognize the significance of this current flow, and CFC and other guys included. Okay, so this is pretty interesting because I think this race was the race that I did the most wrong. If I improved upon this, there are lots of things I could have improved upon this race that could have really changed the outcome of this regatta. I would say that this is I'm definitely going to look back at this race a few more times in the future. I narrowly avoid breaking rule 13 or 15 with the painter there, but he's a nice guy, so shout outs to the painter. I'm going to give you a beer for that, if I can. I don't know, you're in Australia or something. Peter's in my lane, so I try to head up a little bit. But here's my first mistake of the race, and that is that I get very greedy at the start. You'll see here, head down very early, have to luff, and that sort of just botches my start. And you can already see I'm second row right away. Gonna have to hang around in his wind shadow as to not have to tack out and hit Coco or duck anyone. So I just sort of wait, and then already in this part of the race I'm in the bottom half of the fleet, not doing so hot. But hey, the race is not over, and I'm pretty good at this thing called coming back. You know, as I like to call it catch up. It's in the food ornament, because, you know, catching up, catch up, sort of the same thing, at least to me, phonetically, or however you refer to that as. So anyway, I decide to follow these guys out course right because, as I mentioned before, this current is definitely going to help us in the long run. You'll see guys that are falling victim to the wind and shift, and what that's telling them, but they don't recognize that this current is going to really hurt them in the long run. I pass Pixel there because I just know that will work, and I duck all these boats because I want to get around the right side. Whenever you see a real cluster of boats like this, it usually means that they're going to engage in some sort of tacking duel just for positioning and sort of scoot around. So you want to be the outside of that, so as to not lose ground on the boats that are being most effective. and that's why I sort of head out into this lighter air, where it's like less current but lighter air. I sort of let these guys sort of deal with each other while I just race my own race and hope for the best and really just try to catch up to these guys. It's also worth noting that if I want to get to ley line as soon as possible, that's a good thing, because the current's pushing down, and guys that are under ley as you approach the mark, or as you get closer to the mark, for them it's going to turn out worse. And we'll see why later. So right now you can already see that I'm in the top half of the fleet, which is already a big improvement, already a good sign. It means that I'm playing the course right. No pun intended. So I'm fairly happy with this, where I am right now. I think in hindsight I could probably stay out of CFC's way a little bit. Just in hindsight. CFC tack, so I tack not to tack under him and tack into his wind shadow and be covered the entire way. So I follow behind him, and I'm basically on lay with this knock here. And all these guys you can already see already, like Bobcher right here, he's in trouble because he has to maneuver around Wombat, and then he has to maneuver around Cruise, but he's got Tinker Sailor, and you can see that sort of just makes him wind up with a penalty there. The reason he breaks Rule 20 there is because he hails room to tack, and then goes basically instantly, and he doesn't allow Tinker Sailor to really respond before he goes. Rule 20 is an interesting beast. I'm gonna save it for a different video. But he has the penalty. He doesn't have any qualms with him having the penalty, so he takes the turn. And Laserman Dan, once again, saving Bobcher's regatta. Laserman Dan. Okay. Now, I make a few questionable decisions here. I think what I was thinking here is like, oh, I want course right, but there's a lot of people over there. So, and I was sort of like in this state of indecision right now. So I lose to a lot of boats in my indecision. I think the best thing would be to actually just hang out course left, and then do what I did a little later, because I think what I did a little later was fine. I lost on a lot of boats just because I just sort of decided to hang out in their wind shadows. And you'll see what I do with this mark rounding. Like I said before, this current is much better out course right, but I decided to do something a little interesting here. I decide to go out course left, as to avoid everyone's wind shadow over at the course right side, but also just to sort of like play the shift was sort of going left. There's a little bit more wind there, so I figured I would go here for now, but then tack as soon as possible, sort of just get the best of both worlds. As you can see, like, I'm in more wind right now, but we can see that this blob of wind here is starting to come in, and this one's starting to recede. So the predominant wind is going to be right soon, and I know that, at least for now. But I think I make another questionable decision here, because I wasn't sure exactly how long it would take. So I think around here I decide to tack as to avoid the lull of wind that I'd be approaching by going more right. As you can see here, very light wind. So I think around here, yeah, there we go. I decided to tack, and I think I should have really just stayed out, kept on going course right, because we'll see later on this starts to really come in, and these guys start to get affected by the big lull of wind. I think also this lull of wind seems to be increasing in size, so if I went through it earlier, I would have to deal with it a little less. Now I'm just sort of in the blunt of it. But I sort of recognize that I think it's better to let maybe Bobcher and Flo pass me here, because they're in the wind right now. They're making huge gains. I think it's best just to stick it out and get to where they're at, and not stay behind the guys on the left. That's sort of just like a decision-making sort of thing. Opportunity cost is something I'd like to refer to it as. It's either you can lose out to 2 boats and get to the side you want to, or stick with what you know. A lot of people like to stick with what they know. Like, we'll see lots of these guys that stick out left are just sticking with what they know and playing it safe, but sometimes you just have to recognize opportunities and go for them. Now, I'm a little worried here. Although I'm in a top 10, top 6 position right now, I'm a little worried that Bobcher's ahead of me there. I think at this point in the regatta, I realized that Bobcher is the guy to beat. He's had 3 races where he's been like top 5, and I've sort of just been straggling behind him. So I have to make something work. So I start to get close to Bobcher, and that was a bad tack right there. Actually, I think the best thing to do would just been duck him and then fall right behind him, because right now he just rolls right over me. I lose speed, I lose on other boats. Definitely not a good call by me. Like I said before, this was definitely the race that I could have improved upon the most out of all the races in the regatta. But hey, I mean, I'm not complaining with a 6th. Although I did say I wanted to drop the 5th, but you know, sometimes it doesn't work out all you want to. That's life. So I'm in 6th right now, and ideally I'd like to catch Bobcher here. So what I do is I sort of, as I'm rounding this mark here, I sort of just try to smother Bobcher. And I do so pretty effectively, because that makes him, because I head up, and that sort of makes him recognize that he has to jibe out there. But that also gives me the nice wind line that he doesn't have, so I make gains continuously on Bobcher throughout this last run here. So that's good for me. Skiffs are interesting in that the guy behind is typically advantaged, assuming they're in range, because they can make very effective attacks on their leaders and their competition in front of them. I may have a thread about it on the forums in the tactics section if anyone wants to check it out or find it. I might post a video about it soon, I guess. I don't know. Depends on what you guys want to see. So you can see, yeah, I'm making gains, staying close to Bobcher. He tries to roll me here, but I know better, so he doesn't do that. Right now it's a pretty close finish between me, Not Ainsley, Bobcher, and Cruz. And I'm okay with how this turns out, because I finished ahead of Bobcher here. He decides to luff. I don't know if that was a miscue, or if he was worried that I would luff as a result of his wind shadow. For those of you at home watching and don't know what I'm referring to, in skiffs, their downwind VMG line, or yellow line in this case, right here, as you can see, it varies with speed. So if I'm going slower, I would head up into Bobcher, and I think he recognized that a little bit. But I'm pretty sure it was more of a miscue, because I feel like Bobcher would want to finish in front of me. He, I think, also recognizes that him and I are sort of like the top guys at this point, and no one else can really contend with us after this race. But yeah, the main theme of this race was definitely course right, had less current, and in floppy conditions and shifty conditions like this, the current is the stone cold constant. And so, you know, going course right both ways definitely helped. And that it's usually how it is with significant current differences, is you want to stay with what you know will work, especially in an environment which is just all over the place in terms of conditions. So at this point, it's my 2-5-6 versus Bobcher's 1-3-7. So I'm 2 points behind. So I'm thinking if I stay close to him in the results and going to the final race, then I think I'll have a shot. And it's a good thing to just sort of think about. But yeah, this is definitely the race I could have improved upon the most. As you can see, out of all the races I finished, this was the worst result of mine. If I got on like a 3rd here, you know, could have won. If I had a good start, you know, But hey, I mean, it's not everyone's day all the time. So, moving on to this fourth race. Okay. And we have bigs here. And I like bigs a lot, actually. And the reason I like bigs the most, a lot of people don't like bigs, but the reason I like bigs the most out of all the boats on SailX is because they require the most experience to sail. So you'll typically see the guys out front are the guys that are most experienced, and that sort of kind of alludes to what happens later on in the race. But in my experience, it kind of separates the guys that know what they're doing from the guys that have an idea of what to do but can't really execute. So for me, I like it because it's a nice little consistency thing. Whenever I go into a race with bigs in a point of a regatta, like let's say it's a daily, it's the last race and it's bigs, I feel confident because I typically do well in bigs. For me, I'm not worried about anything less than getting anything less than third in bigs. And even in this race with like lots of good guys and lots of guys that know what they're doing, I still feel confident going into this race. And although there were a few things I could have improved upon, it was definitely a solid race all around. So definitely backing up what I'm saying there. Now, so far, there's a slight current advantage left. So the plan, for the most part, is to start sort of at the pin, but sort of mid. Once again, if I want to be daring, current's pushing toward the right, so I could underlay the pin a bit if I want to fight for something. But hey, all these guys are going to start to get good starts and fast starts because they know what they're doing. So definitely best just to get a good lane and get a good start here, especially in bigs, because you don't want to find yourself in a second row start in bigs. It just gets worse and worse from there, because then your options are really stifled. Now Herbert Sailing asked for a bigger course. It's a little funny because I think Istella actually shortens the course. Actually, no, he doesn't shorten the course. He shortens the geo. So he does respond to Herbert Sailing's request, I guess. Herbert Sailing didn't have the best of regattas this time, and you know he's relatively new to my knowledge, but he's proven to be very good. He doesn't have a lot of experience in large regattas like this, though, being a Kiwi and being in the time zone in which it's a little less populated. So not as experienced in big regattas like this. But here we go, about 10 seconds. I have a solid lane with slippery when wet. Could have probably picked a little bit of a better lane, but overall, good start. I'm punched out early, as you can see here, with the exception of the right guys, and one of them being Bobcher. So when I see that, I start to panic a bit, because I know for a fact that, wow, okay, it's me and Bobcher, and it's really our regatta to win, if anyone's. Like that was the point where I was just like, okay, this means war. Because as I said in my other video, I didn't expect Bobcher to do this well, because he doesn't have a whole lot of experience in these regattas. Now, what Bobcher does is that he tried to duck there and pick up some speed, but in this current, you're fighting the current more by doing that. So I think mathematically that puts you at a disadvantage if you try to go for those. So you don't see me try to go for those for that reason. And something else to note is that I'm sort of happy staying out here in this current, because when you come back, it's easier to lay. You'll find that these guys overlay a lot. And I duck Bobcher here as to avoid his wind shadow, because I sort of knew he would want to attack there. So I duck early and sort of just let Coolin get his bad air, sort of. So I'll have room to attack onto lay later on, and this puff comes in, so that sort of solidifies our position over the rest of the fleet. Now, as I mentioned before, it's the top guys that will typically be leading the fleet in bigs. And of course, there are a few exceptions, of course, because you see like people like Retorno, CFC back there, Herbert sailing. It's like it doesn't work out for everyone, but in the front, it's Bobcher, Flo, me, Grits, Laserman Dan, guys that know what they're doing. And in this regatta, it's hard to prove that point because everyone is pretty good, but that's typically what you'll see at lower level regattas, and maybe even smaller regattas. Especially since the new guys don't necessarily know how to do settings and such. Now Flo sneaks in there, and I kind of want to talk about what Flo and I do in this downwind because that's sort of like the thing to do in bigs. So coming up is definitely a little interesting exchange that we all sort of have. So Bobcher's in the lead, and Bobcher makes a leisurely rounding, but Flo really cuts in there, and I cut in there too. In fact, I lower the spinnaker so I can just turn faster and not be covered by Laserman Dan. Coolin does the same thing, so he can cover Laserman Dan, in fact, if I zoom out a little bit. So it's a little thing. I don't know if it's faster or not, but Flo is more deeper into the wind. He jibes and starts to control Bobcher here. And I sort of like try to stay where Flo's at, just sort of keep a nice course behind it because I know Flo's going to want to control Bobcher. And this is sort of the point where I realized that Flo's keeping him out, and if I just sort of keep a nice steady course, I can make gains in Bobcher, and what you'll see here is what I wanted. So Flo makes a wide rounding, which is good because now I can make this narrow rounding and Bob owes me room. And it's a good rounding. I took all the room I could, but Bobcher gets a little greedy there and breaks Rule 18. He owes me room there because I took all the room I could necessary to round the mark. The rule doesn't state you have to round the mark as tightly as possible. It just says you have to take as much room necessary to round the mark. So Bobcher effectively breaks Rule 18 or 16. I'm not sure which one really applies there since we're exiting the mark. But irregardless isn't a word, but regardless, he breaks Rule 18 there. Sort of interesting exchange, but it's good for me because I need to put boats between me and Bobcher at this point, since I recognize that he is for sure my immediate competition. I sort of exchange a few words with Bobcher about that because him and I sort of know that was on purpose, and he makes a little bit of a subtle comment, but we both recognize that was entirely on purpose. He's like, my mistake worked out very well for you, or me rather, and I say I suppose that's sort of us just recognizing that that mistake that I made was sort of like a nice one, using the rules to your advantage. I typically don't like to use the rules as part of my whole chess game thing. I typically just like to sail circles around people. But in those kind of cases, when you have like the world championship on the line, you'll see me kind of resort to that sort of stuff and sort of put on my lawyer hat and use the rules to my advantage there. You know, the reason I typically don't like to protest and I wouldn't say use the rules to my advantage, but just like use the rules as a majority of my game plan, or put the rules in like the center of my game plan. The reason I typically don't prefer to do that is because to me it causes me and others to focus around the wrong ideas on how to do well in SailX, which are like having a good start, staying away from boats when things get messy, and among a few other things. I've said it all in however many threads I've written about this stuff. So I typically just like to stay away from the whole protest side of things on SailX. which some people have, a lot of people actually have a different opinion on, but for me, it's something that I like to stay away from, and Flow typically stays away from it as well. So something interesting to note there: Yahooz and Flow don't protest a whole lot. So what does that say? So right now it's pretty clear who's 1, 2, Laserman Dan in 3rd. Coolin is being followed closely by Bobcher, so Bobcher is likely going to catch him here. Since there's not going to be much development with my race and Flow's race, I'm going to sort of just back up here and sort of look at what Bobcher does as opposed to Coolin. So Coolin makes a rounding, tries to turn through. Bobcher makes another leisurely rounding. He has covered him there. And George actually pointed this out in the commentary, the live commentary, that Bobcher, yeah, he does sail in like a slightly more wind here, but Coolin's real mistake is that this current's pushing out, so Coolin right now is sailing extra distance. So when he comes back, he's going to be fighting this current, and he's going to be in a bad position. You can already see that he's falling a bit behind Bobcher here. Coming back, definitely not a good outlook for him, because if he heads down even more, he's getting close to the mark on this finish line here, mostly because of the current pushing him that way. Bobcher is just staying in a nice wind line here. Coolin sailed a little bit extra distance, didn't really cover his man being Bobcher, his immediate competition, and sort of lost out onto the advantages that Bob gained by going course left. So that was something that George pointed out, which was pretty interesting. If you wanna not lose out on positions, you gotta stay on your man sometimes, and Coolin didn't quite do that. And yeah, so pretty straightforward race. Pretty critical moment at the mark rounding, the leeward mark, between me and Bobcher, and so that puts me at 2562 or 5262 if you want to go in order, and Bob at a 1374, I believe. So right now on drop, we are I'm one behind him, but with the drops we're tied. And at this point we're cemented as top 2. So that kind of screws up my mentality, as we'll see in this later race, this last race with teams boats. Let me just pull it up real quick, because I recognize, well, it's down to me and Bobcher for sure. There's no question about it. And so I think of all the possibilities, because at this scenario, in this particular scenario, if it goes to a tiebreak, I need to, which it probably will, I need to not only beat Bobcher, but improve upon my drop. And that's very difficult, especially in these boats. It's going to be hard. So I'm trying to find an easier solution. And my solution, because I look at this course and I'm like, okay, well, it's a blurb of wind, so there might be a shift later on, and there's better current out course right. So I wasn't really concerned with starting at the correct side of the course at the time, because of stuff that could change. My immediate competition was Bobcher, and I was determined to stay with him, and not to let him get any advantage whatsoever. And then I think at this point I realized, SailX sometimes doesn't score correctly. It will sometimes go off of raw score rather than who has the better race in a tiebreak. So all this in mind, I start going hunting for Bobcher. In hindsight, not the best call. I typically like to just race strong the last race, sort of try to beat out my immediate competition, beat him rationally and normally. But here, it was the World Championships, and I was like, I gotta stay with Bobcher. I gotta make sure he gets a bad start, and I get a decent start, and I can work from there. So that was sort of my thinking. And you'll see that we start to engage here. I sort of just try to keep him away, and that becomes pretty apparent. I luff up here. He knows I'm coming after him. I don't think he has a whole lot of match racing experience, so I think I try to intimidate him, really, just by doing all this stuff, just sort of keeping him out there. I figure he doesn't have a lot of match racing experience, so really just making moves on him was enough to really instill the fear. And I think how I executed what I wanted to do was good, but I just didn't do it properly in accordance with the course, and we'll see how that works out later on. So 1 minute 30, still messing with Bob. People are already setting up in these boats, which is pretty interesting. I'm actually going to fast forward through just to sort of, so it's 1 minute, I'm messing with Bob, and here's where the approach starts for me and Bob here. So I'm sort of just like wasting time, making sure he's well behind. And here's the point I want to comment on, because I think I did this pretty well. My goal is to get a lane but shut him out from any lane. So I'm looking, if he tacks here, then I tack as well and sort of block him out until I can get a lane. But at this point it's 20 seconds, so I decide, hey, I can get a lane and he won't be able to. So I tack, and right now it's almost 10 seconds, so he's desperately trying to find a lane. So he tacks immediately, which is not a very good choice. I would have, if he were disciplined, he would have gone out past to no mercy, and has to start there. And I get a decent start, but alas, it is a very left-favored shift, so doesn't wind up turning out well for me in terms of this race. And another thing is, I should have tacked off a little bit earlier as to cover Bobcher. What he does is pretty cool here. He kind of follows one of my principles, and if I can fast forward through this a bit, he just sort of goes around the fleet as they sort of converge together. We'll see here as people start to attack. So right about here, so when people start to attack, I figure I gotta get course left, I gotta catch up, I gotta get boats, you know. But Bobcher is just going around the right side. He knows that people are gonna be fighting, they're gonna be losing out. He's gonna keep a steady little pace with the guys out right, and already you can see that he's gaining on me because I'm stuck in these wind shadows. I'm thinking of what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? I need to catch up with boats. And Bobcher is just sitting there, looking pretty, like I'm winning this regatta for sure. And I'm sort of in a panic because I know this now, because I see Bobcher up there and I'm like, I gotta do something. I gotta do something. You know, it really turned the tables on me. I feel like I instilled the panic on him pretty early on, only to find the tables reversed due to my own stubbornness. So that was pretty interesting. How I sort of just like I lost to myself this race, and that sort of just made me collapse in terms of the regatta. So I go out left here because I'm like, you know what, I gotta sneak in if I can, because that's my last chance of salvaging what I can. There's no room to do so. I have to abide by Rule 19, and from there it's just I'm behind Bobcher by quite a bit. Everyone's crashing. The leaders have really extended, so I'm like, I'm not going to improve upon my my finish, but I might as well try to finish because, you know, that's the thing to do, you know, just finish out a regatta. But then I get a penalty with Zagia, get a little frustrated by that, try to spin in here to no avail, and then retire, and that is the end of my regatta. And so Bobcher, if we can find him, sort of now has to do a victory lap, because he's won the regatta. On countback, he has the first. So even though he finished outside his drop, he still won. Especially since I got a DNF, so I never would have figured out if the raw score theory would have worked there. But at this point, he's just taking a victory lap. So well done to Bobcher. Good win for him. And regatta over. As we can see, Flo is out in front this race, so he gets a third. And yeah, nothing else really interesting happening in this race, aside from the typical stuff you'd see. With these boats, it can get pretty messy. He says, I think Yah did the math wrong. And I knew the math, I just decided to ignore it because I thought I could do something a little easier and something a bit more reliable. And yeah, nothing else for me really to discuss. So overall, these were the results. I kept it as close as possible. So not disappointed. You know, it's funny actually. Kind of reminds me, because I'm thinking sort of about like the themes of these kind of races, and sort of like what worked and what didn't. And I remembered back to a thread that Bobcher actually posted, world's final start strategy. He was just like, I'm looking on how to do it, and like maybe someone who's outside the top 30 can give me advice. And I wasn't supposed to compete in the championships, so I replied with a bunch of information right here. You can see. So, you know, I mean, well done to Bobcher. He definitely deserved the win. He's been on top of leaderboards. It's been his year and such, and he's definitely hung with the top guys, and definitely proven from time again he can do that. But you know, next time he won't be wrapping my brain as much come next World Championship. Maybe the results would be a little different. You know, our scores did match in terms of points with the drop, so you know, this might have something to do with that, and our consistency in us making the least amount of mistakes. And that's sort of something I want to talk about, actually, us making the least amount of mistakes, because that's kind of what the regatta was all about. Whoever made the least mistakes and choked the least was going to win. And I sort of pointed that out a little bit here, but hey, I mean, Bobcher was the better man that day. Doesn't matter what I told him it. So well done to him, well done to Flo for keeping the competition close. And yeah, so if you like these videos, let me know, comment, like, maybe subscribe, whatever you want to do. And I'll probably be releasing more content on SailX's channel and my channel in the future, and maybe be streaming for a bit, so look out for that. But for now, I'm out. Peace, guys, and have a good day.